has you ever stopped to think about, like, how a big company decides what to buy?
Hmm.
I mean, it's not just one person in a huge corporation saying, hey, let's go with this software.
Right.
There are so many moving parts, and it's a whole world unto itself.
It is.
Towards the business markets and buyer behavior.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at this business textbook chapter that you shared with me,
Yeah.
which really digs into how organizations make decisions about what to buy
Right.
and why.
And this is something that I think is so fascinating because we talk a lot about individual consumer behavior.
Yeah.
But this is like, zooming out and looking at, the behavior of entire companies and institutions
Absolutely.
when they're making these purchasing decisions.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to think about, the impact that these decisions have on the economy as a whole.
Right.
Because, these large organizations, they're making purchasing decisions that are worth millions,
Right.
sometimes billions of dollars.
Billions.
And so it's really important to understand how those decisions are made.
Yeah. And it's valuable for anyone to understand this, whether you're, in sales and marketing trying to sell to other businesses.
Sure.
Or if you're working within a company and you want to understand,
Yeah.
how these decisions are being made.
Yeah.
Or if you're just curious about the forces that shape our world.
Yeah,
I think this is really fascinating stuff.
absolutely.
So in this deep dive, our goal is to take this chapter
Yep.
and really extract the most crucial insights.
Right.
We don't want to bore people with a bunch of, jargon and definitions.
Yeah.
We really want to get to the practical, like what does this actually mean?
Yeah.
How does it actually work?
The insights.
So let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
What is a business market? And what does this term business buyer behavior actually mean?
So business market is basically all the organizations that buy goods and services
Okay.
for one of three reasons. One is to use in producing other goods or services. Another is to resell to other businesses or consumers. And the third is to support their own operations.
Okay, so it's like the whole supply chain and all the stuff that has to happen
Exactly.
before a product gets to us as consumers.
Exactly. So, think about a car manufacturer buying steel.
Right.
Or a grocery store stocking its shelves with food.
Right.
These are all examples of business markets.
Okay, and that makes sense why it's so different from consumer buyer behavior, because it's not just one person, making a decision based on their own needs and wants.
Right.
It's a whole organization
Exactly.
with, lots of different stakeholders.
Yeah. And business buyer behavior, that's what we're talking about when we look at how these organizations make those purchasing decisions.
Okay.
So who are the key players, what influences their choices.
Okay.
What's the process that they go through.
So you would think that buying is buying, whether it's me buying a new phone or a business buying, software or something. But the book really highlights some pretty significant differences between how businesses buy and how consumers buy.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the key things to keep in mind there?
Well, the first one is market structure and demand.
Okay.
So in business markets, you typically have fewer buyers.
Yeah.
But those buyers are much larger
Okay.
than in consumer markets.
Right. Because if you're selling to another business, it's not going to be one person buying. It's going to be, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands.
Exactly. And those buyers are also often geographically concentrated.
Okay.
So think about like the concentration of aerospace suppliers in certain regions.
Okay. So like if you're selling a very specialized piece of industrial equipment,
Right.
your pool of potential customers is already going to be very small.
Yes.
And they're all going to be located in this specific area.
Exactly. Another really important difference is derived demand. This means that the demand for business goods and services is ultimately driven by the demand for consumer goods and services.
Okay.
So, for example, let's take Gore-Tex fabric.
Okay.
The demand for Gore-Tex fabric by clothing companies exists only because people like you and me want to buy waterproof jackets.
Right.
If consumer interest in those jackets drops, so will the demand for Gore-Tex.
Regardless of the price.
Regardless of the price.
So it's not like, oh, well, if they lower the price of Gore-Tex, then, the clothing company's going to buy more.
Right.
It's really dependent on whether consumers actually want the final product.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. The book also mentioned inelastic demand and fluctuating demand.
Yes.
Can you explain those a little bit?
Sure. So inelastic demand just means that in the short term,
Okay.
the demand for many business goods and services doesn't change much.
Okay.
Even if the price goes up or down a bit.
Right. So like if a factory needs a specific part to keep running, They're not going to be like, oh, well, the price went up $5, so we're just going to shut down the whole operation.
Exactly.
They're going to have to pay whatever it costs to get that part.
Right.
Interesting. And then fluctuating demand.
Fluctuating demand means that the demand for business goods and services can be much more unstable than consumer demand.
Okay.
So even small changes in consumer demand can lead to big swings in business demand,
Okay.
either up or down.
So if there's a sudden surge in demand for electric vehicles,
Right.
then suddenly all of the companies that supply the parts for those electric vehicles,
Yeah,
they're going to see a huge increase in demand.
absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the kind of overall market. Now let's zoom in a little bit to the buying unit.
Yeah.
So who within a business is actually making these decisions?
So the nature of the buying unit is another major difference between business and consumer markets.
Okay.
Business purchasing is usually a more professional
Okay.
and structured process than individual consumer buying.
All right, it's not like me going to the grocery store and just throwing whatever I feel like in my cart.
Exactly. It often involves what's called a buying center,
Okay.
which isn't a physical place,
Okay.
but a group of people within the organization who have different roles
Okay.
and influence the purchasing decision.
So like a committee, almost.
Exactly like a committee.
Okay,
mostly.
interesting. So who are the typical players in one of these buying centers?
Well, the textbook outlines several key roles.
Okay.
So first you have the users.
Okay.
These are the people who will actually use the product or service.
Got it.
Then you have influencers.
Okay.
And these folks, they don't directly use the product or service,
Okay.
but they provide input based on their technical expertise
What-
or their knowledge of the market or whatever.
Right. Like if they're buying new software for the accounting department,
Yeah.
they might bring in someone from IT
Yeah,
to give their input.
exactly. Then you have buyers. And these are the folks who have the formal authority to choose the supplier
Got it.
and negotiate the terms.
Okay.
Then you have the deciders.
Okay.
These are the folks who ultimately approve the purchase.
So like the CFO or the CEO or someone like that.
Exactly. And finally, you have gatekeepers.
Okay. Yeah.
And these are the people who control the flow of information to the buying center.
Okay.
So they might be like, screening potential vendors or managing communication or whatever.
So if you are trying to sell something to a company,
Yeah,
you can't just go to one person.
right.
You have to understand all the different players
Exactly.
and who has influence
Yes.
and who the decision maker is and all of that.
And that can be really difficult.
Right.
Because those power dynamics can be really subtle and complex.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads into the third difference between business buying and consumer buying,
Yeah.
which is that these decisions
Yes.
and the process for making them is just so much more complex and formalized.
Sure.
It's not like me going to the store and being like, oh, I like that. Let me buy it.
Right.
There's a whole, process with committees and RFPs and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. And then the decisions that are being made are often, involving a lot more money
Right.
and a lot more technical considerations
Right.
than a typical consumer purchase.
So what are some of the things that influence these business buyers? I'm guessing it's not just about, price or features or whatever.
It's definitely not just about price or features. It's a much more complex picture.
Okay.
The textbook categorizes these influences into 4 main groups.
Okay.
Environmental,
Okay.
organizational,
Okay.
interpersonal, and
Interpersonal.
individual factors.
Okay. So let's break those down.
Sure.
Let's start with environmental factors. So what kind of things are we talking about there?
So environmental factors are basically the broader economic,
Okay.
technological,
Yeah.
competitive,
Got it.
and cultural forces that can impact a business's purchasing decisions.
So like if the economy is in a recession,
Yeah,
businesses are probably going to be more hesitant to make big purchases.
absolutely. Or if there's a new technology that comes out that could disrupt their industry,
Right.
they might need to invest in that technology in order to stay competitive.
Or if there are new regulations that they have to comply with
Right.
that could also influence their decisions.
Exactly.
So it's really about the big picture external factors.
Exactly.
Okay, what about organizational factors? What's going on inside the company that might influence these decisions?
So organizational factors are things like the company's specific objectives,
Okay.
their overall strategies,
Okay.
their organizational structure,
Got it.
the systems they have in place,
Okay.
and their standard operating procedures.
So it's kind of like their internal culture and their processes.
Exactly. So, for example, a company that's focused on rapid expansion
Okay.
might be more open to investing in innovative
Yeah.
but potentially risky technologies,
Right.
whereas a company that's very hierarchical
Okay.
might have a more bureaucratic and lengthy approval process for even routine purchases.
So it's kind of like a small startup versus a big corporation.
Exactly.
They're going to make decisions very differently.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, what about interpersonal factors?
So interpersonal factors are all about the relationships between the individuals involved in the purchasing decision.
Okay, so back to the buying center.
Exactly.
So who has the most influence?
Yeah,
Who has the most expertise?
right.
What are the dynamics between the different people
Okay.
on the committee?
And these things can be really subtle and complex.
Right. It's like office politics, basically.
Kind of like office politics.
Interesting. Okay, and then finally, individual factors.
Right. So individual factors are the characteristics of the individual buyers themselves.
Okay.
So things like their age,
Okay.
their level of education,
Okay.
their job position,
Got it.
their personality,
Okay.
their risk tolerance, and their personal buying style.
So, like, if the person who's in charge of making this decision is someone who's very risk-averse,
Yeah,
they might be less likely to go with a new or untested vendor.
exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about the different factors that influence these decisions.
Right.
Now let's look at the actual business buying process.
Sure.
What are the typical steps that a business goes through when they're making a purchase?
The textbook outlines 8 stages in the business buying process.
8 stages. Wow.
Okay. So it begins with problem recognition.
Okay.
And this is where someone within the company realizes that there's a need
Okay.
that can be met by acquiring a specific product or service.
So it could be that a piece of equipment breaks down or
Right.
they realize that they need new software to
Yeah.
be more efficient or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so problem recognition, what's step 2?
Step 2 is general need description.
Okay.
And this is where the buyer outlines the general characteristics and quantity of the needed item.
So it's like we need, 100 laptops with these general specs.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what?
Stage 3 is product specification.
Okay.
This is where the technical requirements of the needed item are developed in detail.
Okay.
And oftentimes there's a value analysis engineering team that gets involved at this stage.
Okay, what do they do?
So their goal is to analyze the product's function
Okay.
and find the most cost-effective way to achieve the required performance.
So it's not just about getting the best thing.
Right.
It's about getting the best thing for the price.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so once they know exactly what they need, what happens next?
Then comes supplier search.
Okay.
So the buyer actively looks for potential suppliers who can provide the specified product or service.
And are they, looking online or calling people up, or how are they doing this these days?
Yeah, a lot of it's online now.
Okay.
So they're using, online resources, industry-specific databases,
yeah.
attending trade shows,
Got it.
all sorts of things.
Okay, so once they've found some potential suppliers, then what?
Then it's proposal solicitation.
Okay.
This is where the buyer invites qualified suppliers to submit proposals,
Okay.
outlining their offering, including pricing, delivery timelines,
Yeah.
service terms, all that kind of stuff.
So that's like the RFP process.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm guessing those proposals can get pretty long and complicated.
They can be very extensive, particularly for complex purchases.
Yeah, especially if it's something that's, highly technical or specialized.
Right.
Okay, so now they've got all these proposals. What happens next?
Then comes supplier selection.
Okay.
So this is where the buying center evaluates the proposals
Okay.
and chooses a supplier or suppliers
Okay.
based on a variety of factors.
And it's not just about price, I'm guessing.
Price is important, of course,
Sure.
but they'll also consider things like the supplier's technical capabilities,
Okay.
their reputation for reliability and service,
Yeah.
their delivery track record, their financial stability even.
Right, because if you're signing a contract with someone, you want to make sure they're actually going to be around
Exactly.
to fulfill the terms of that contract.
Right.
Okay, so once they've selected the supplier, then what?
Then we're at stage 7, order routine specification.
Okay.
So this is where the buyer finalizes the order with the chosen supplier,
Oh, wait.
detailing all the specifics, the quantities, the delivery schedule,
Got it.
the return policies, warranty information, all that stuff.
So all the little details.
Exactly.
Okay, and then finally.
Performance review.
Okay.
So after the purchase has been made and the product or service is being used,
Yeah.
the buyer will assess the supplier's performance.
Okay.
And this feedback is then used to make decisions about future purchases.
Right, so it's a continuous process of improvement.
Exactly.
Now, I want to touch on something that I think is really interesting, which is how all of this has changed in the digital age.
Right.
This book was written before the internet was really a thing.
Right.
And I'm curious to get your take on how business-to-business digital and social media marketing has really changed this whole process.
So the internet and social media have become vital tools for businesses looking to connect with other businesses.
Okay.
Platforms like LinkedIn with their professional focus and really sophisticated targeting options
Right.
are just essential these days.
Yeah, I see so many businesses now using LinkedIn to build their brand
Yeah.
and to generate leads
Right.
and to share valuable content.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about having a website anymore.
Right.
It's about being active and engaged on these platforms where your customers are.
Exactly. And it's really important for businesses to have a strong digital presence
Okay.
if they want to be successful in B2B marketing.
Okay, now I know that not all business purchases are created equal.
Right.
The book mentions different buying situations.
Yes.
So can you walk me through those?
Sure. So there are three main types of buying situations that we see in business markets.
Great.
The first is a straight rebuy.
Okay.
And this is when a company routinely reorders something they've purchased before
Okay.
without any changes to the specifications or the supplier.
So like if an office reorders printer paper every month.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the second type?
The second type is a modified rebuy.
Okay.
And this is when the buyer wants to make some changes to the product specs, the price, the terms, or even switch suppliers.
Okay.
So they have some experience with the product category,
Okay.
but they're looking for something different this time around.
Got it. Okay, and the third type?
The third type is a new task.
Okay.
And this is when a company is purchasing a product or service for the very first time.
Okay.
So it's the most complex buying situation.
Right, because they're starting from scratch.
Exactly. They don't have any prior experience to draw on.
Now, the book also mentions something called systems selling.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
So systems selling is also known as solutions selling. And it's a pretty common strategy, particularly for complex projects.
Okay.
The idea is that instead of selling individual products or services separately,
Yeah.
a company offers a complete integrated solution to meet the buyer's needs.
So it's like one-stop shopping for businesses.
Exactly.
Now, I know that we've been talking about businesses in general, but I'm curious to hear about some of the specific types of business markets that are out there.
Sure.
Like, for example, government markets. How do those work?
So government markets are obviously a huge part of the economy.
Right. The government buys a lot of stuff.
They do. They buy a lot of stuff, and they have some unique characteristics.
Okay, like what?
Well, first of all, government buying is subject to a high degree of public scrutiny,
Okay.
and there's often a preference for domestic suppliers.
Okay.
The purchasing process typically involves a formal bidding process,
Okay.
and contracts are often awarded through negotiation.
Got it.
And then there are all sorts of regulations and political considerations that come into play.
Right. So it's a lot more complicated than just, sending a sales pitch to the government.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about institutional markets?
So institutional markets include organizations like schools, hospitals, nursing homes, and prisons.
Okay.
These organizations often serve captive audiences,
Okay.
and they may have different purchasing objectives compared to for-profit businesses.
Right, because their main goal isn't necessarily to, make a profit.
Exactly.
It's to provide a service.
Right.
Okay, wow. We have covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
I feel like my brain is about to explode.
It's a lot of information.
It is, but it's so fascinating. I'm curious to hear what you think the most important takeaways are for our listeners.
Well, I think one of the key things to remember is that business markets operate under very different rules
Okay.
than consumer markets.
Okay.
So, we've talked about fewer but larger buyers,
Right.
a demand that's driven by consumer needs,
Right.
and a more complex decision-making process.
Right. Involving all these buying centers.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think for me, the thing that really stood out was this idea of a buying center.
Yeah.
I always thought of business purchases as being, fairly straightforward.
Right.
But realizing that there's this whole team of people involved
Absolutely.
and they all have their own, perspectives and priorities,
Yes.
that was a real aha moment for me.
It really highlights the importance of understanding not just the product or service you're offering,
Right.
but also the internal dynamics of the organization you're trying to reach.
So to leave our listeners with something to think about, I want to pose this question.
Okay.
We've talked about all these complexities in the business buying process.
Right.
How do you think the increasing use of data analytics and AI is going to change things even further?
That's a really great question.
How is that going to affect the roles within buying centers?
Yeah.
How is it going to affect the overall buying process?
It's certainly going to have a major impact.
Yeah, it's something to really keep an eye on in the years to come.
Absolutely.